now, demonstrators have just taken over a government building in the city of Almaty and set other government offices on fire. Anger has been building since the government lifted a fuel price cap on New Year's Day. And now reports of an internet blackout in that country after a day of mobile internet disruptions and partial restrictions. We'll get more news from RT correspondent Nikki Aaron.
3 states of emergency have been declared across the republic as Kazakhstan experiences its worst unrest in a decade. The demonstrations erupted after an energy price hike, doubling the cost of liquefied petroleum gas for Kazakhs. The government explained the move by saying the previous price was unsustainable. However, this has not satisfied people in Kazakhstan. They've been pouring onto the streets in their thousands in scenes of utter chaos. The presidential palace in Kazakhstan's biggest city is on fire, as well as the city administration building. Police in Almaty have deployed tear gas and stun grenades in an attempt to disperse huge crowds which continued protesting late into Tuesday night. Now, by the early hours of Wednesday morning, the president had accepted the government's resignation. However, this has done little to quell the protests. So this unrest triggered by this energy price hike is now showing signs of a broader political demand. In the last few hours, protesters were seen attempting to pull down a statue of the previous president, Nursultan Nazarbayev, a man who is believed to still hold a lot of power and influence across the republic. The current president has since removed Nazarbayev from his post as the head of the Security Council. However, with a nationwide internet shutdown currently in force, it's unclear whether this has satisfied the protesters or not. The order of the day, however, is to bring calm back to the streets of Kazakhstan. And in a televised address, President Tokayev promised maximum toughness to the protests.
All right, for analysis of the growing discontent in Kazakhstan, we'll bring in our panel today, former UK MP George Galloway and Alisher Kamidov. He is a consultant on Central Asian affairs for places such as the World Bank, the UN, and a number of other agencies. So Alisher, please start us off here. You're the expert in this region. What has happened to LPG prices and why Kazakhs are so angry now?
Manila, a country the size of 6 Frances with GDP of approximately $169 billion, Kazakhstan is a wealthy country. But much of that wealth over the past 20 years has not trickled down to the country's provinces, to villages, to families. Much of the country's wealth stayed in urban areas such as Almaty, the financial capital, and Nur Sultan, the capital city, in the hands of a small elitist circle associated with former President Nursultan Nazarbayev. So when the prices for liquefied petroleum gas suddenly spiked in earlier this month, this was a fuse that was lit. This was coming. So the protests erupted over the spike in prices, but there were underlying disparities, economic problems, social problems. And so Kazakh people basically said, enough. We've had enough of this elitist politics. So in sum, what we're witnessing today is a culmination of years-long pent-up frustration with misrule and corruption in the country.
Wow. Now, George, the Kazakhs are seeing a shift from the government-subsidized liquefied petrol gas that they've been used to a more free market system on this product, allowing the market to dictate prices based on demand. Is this just growing pains, then, of a developing nation?
No, it was a gross political error by the president and his government, and they should, both of them, pay with their seats for that. The wealth of Kazakhstan is so utterly enormous, as our expert just pointed out. Their sovereign wealth fund would bring tears to your eyes. They could have given away the LPG to the population of Kazakhstan forever, and it wouldn't even have been noticed on their balance sheet. So turning to market forces in this way was a gross political error. But as our expert said, this is merely the proximate reason for this uprising. I've been to Kazakhstan many times. I've seen with my own eyes the gross inequality, not just between rich and poor, but between north and south. The oil and gas rich north, the more clan-based, village-based population, traditional Kazakhs, if you like, in the south. These divisions are very serious. They were very clear to me, even though my ability to talk to people was limited. And this is an accident that's been waiting to happen. The corruption of the ruling elite has to be seen to be believed. When you talk about opulence, you never saw since the French Revolution a ruling caste that lived in such opulence.
Now, Alisher, government officials are insisting that the sharp price increase is to be blamed on petrol stations themselves. The energy minister, Maxim Mirzagaliev, says stations are playing a price-fixing game. Is that really the case?
It's partly the case. Well, the thing is, Kazakh government has been implementing a very controversial social policy and economic policies over the past 5-6 years. They've been increasing prices not just for gas, but also for bread, for basic foodstuffs. We're talking about a rising rate of unemployment in a very wealthy country. We're talking about cuts in social payments to retired people, to workers. Oil workers have been protesting against cuts in their salaries. And so there's been a host of problems, social and economic problems. And you should add to that the lack of political opposition. People who could voice complaints and grievances of ordinary people, they are non-existent. They've been either jailed, opposition leaders, they've been kicked out of the country, some of them may have been killed. So what we're seeing today is a disorganized, chaotic protest in several large cities led by no one. And this is the major problem with these protests. They lack organization, they lack leadership, they're lacking discipline. And that will cause, that can lead to deadly outcomes. The thing is that the Kazakh government has no one to talk to, apart from some mob leaders whom they're arresting actually. So what do you do in this situation when there's no one to talk to? That's why we're seeing these clashes, and tomorrow we might see even more. So this is the grave concern of some observers. Some political are saying that this can lead to the whole resignation of the whole Kazakh government. But the Kazakh government fell. Now we're talking about the President Tokayev. And so there are fears that Tokayev may also fall under these growing protests. I think that these assumptions, these analysis is premature. Tokayev still is the reign over the power, but I think that he's on the defensive. His predecessor, Nazarbayev, there are already reports that he left the country, he stepped down from his position. This is clearly a concession to protesters.
Yeah, this is not something I have seen in my lifetime in Kazakhstan so far. So, George, how would you compare the petrol shortage the UK experienced? Are there any parallels here, especially in the way of government intervention, or in this case, lack thereof?
Well, our government, of course, is a free market government living in a free market economy, and the market rules. But that isn't the case in Kazakhstan, and needn't be the case in Kazakhstan. It is this tilt towards the demands of the IMF to private good, public bad, let the market rip and the devil take the hindmost, that has led to this kind of problem. And it can be compared in some ways, you know, to Belarusia. It has a government, just like the Belarus government, that tried to keep its distance a bit from Russia, be semi-detached, play the political market, if you like. And now the regime change merchants who are raising demands against Russia on the streets of Kazakhstan are busy and the regime that helped them to gain some succor and comfort is likely to be swept away. So anyone in these kind of countries that thinks that keeping your distance from Russia and getting closer to the West and the United States will somehow save your rule is making a big mistake.
Yeah.
As the leaders of Belarusia learned in the last 12 months and as the Kazakh leaders are learning now.
Now, Alisher, I'll give you the last word on this. There's scant reporting now of mass internet outages across regions in Kazakhstan. Is this a deliberate ploy by the government to stifle dissent and limit information coming to light?
That's what's happening. The Kazakh government has done it in the past. They cut off the internet and social apps. They're doing it again. This with the simple goal of suppressing the protesters, preventing them from spreading the message, and also basically debilitating the ability of opposition, various groups from outside the country to finance and to influence the ongoing protests. This is a very Kazakh-style authoritarian move, and I think that it is already working. We cannot connect to my colleagues, and they're not able to reach out. We don't know what's happening in Kazakhstan apart from some limited phone calls. This is a really bad situation. Things can explode.
We will continue to monitor the situation in Kazakhstan. We appreciate your expertise. Alisher Kamidov and George Galloway, thank you both.
Thank you.
And back here stateside, a massive house fire in Philadelphia has killed 13 people. Among those victims, 7 children. 2 others were also hurt. A fire official said the number of fatalities could change as the recovery efforts continue. Firefighters and police responded to that blaze around 6:40 a.m. this morning, coming from a 3-story row house. The fire was brought under control after less than an hour, but the scene remains active. According to officials, the building is a Philadelphia Housing Authority property that was divided into multiple units. And the U.S. is seeing record number job openings as the Great Resignation also shows no signs of easing. So what's driving millions of Americans to quit their jobs? We'll get you a full report on that next. And later at the Sports HQ, Steve Christakos takes us to Australia for second-round action at the WTA Adelaide International. Now make sure you keep up with all the news beyond the headlines 24/7 by downloading the newly improved portable TV app, because it's TV as it should be. Sit tight, we'll be right back. All right, let's take a look at the latest COVID-19 numbers. Worldwide, those cases are topping 295 million, with some 5.4 million reported deaths. Since the pandemic started about 2 years ago, the U.S. continues to lead the way with more than 57 million cases, followed by India at about 35 million, then Brazil at 22 million. In the past 28 days alone, the U.S. remains the leader with over 7 million cases, followed by the U.K. of 3 million and France with 2. Now here in this country, the number of deaths is now over 830,000. Then over to Chicago, where classes have been canceled after the teachers union there voted to switch back to remote learning because of these record COVID cases. The union for the nation's 3rd largest school district argued the district's safety protocols are lacking, leaving both students and teachers vulnerable. 73% of the Chicago Teachers Union called for remote instruction until COVID cases decrease or proper safety protocols are put in place. The French president has said he wants to, quote, irritate the unvaccinated, resorting to an expletive to make his point. His remarks come as the National Assembly debate banning the unjabbed from bars, cafes, and even cinemas. RT's Charlotte Dubinsky has the story.
This is a bill that was supposed to glide through the Parliament without a hiccup, but first on Monday night the debate was suspended, and that was simply because the majority party, this is President Macron's own party, simply couldn't get enough bodies in the chamber for a show of hands to support a motion for the debate to continue into the wee hours of the morning. The debates resumed on Tuesday, but following that extraordinary intervention by President Macron, people were aghast and shocked, as you saw there, at his words. So much so they demanded that the French Prime Minister get straight to the chamber to explain what the president had said. There was a fiery opposition already to this new measure here in France. COVID measures have already seen massive divisions within society, and since 2020, when those restrictions first started, there have been mass protests in the country. So what is this vaccine passport, and why is it perhaps so different to the health passport that's currently in place in France and is already controversial? Well, just to give you an idea, if you're unvaccinated in France right now, you can pay to go and have a test. If it's negative, it will be valid for 24 hours, meaning you can go to cafes or restaurants. This vaccine passport will change all of that substantially. It will mean, if it's passed, that those who are unvaccinated will no longer have the right to access any of these venues. It will even deny them access to long-distance trains. The majority of people have been vaccinated in France, but there remain around 5 million people aged 12 and over who are unvaccinated. And as you can imagine, this is very divisive. On the streets of Paris, there was mixed reaction.
I'm against the vaccine pass because it will not prevent the virus from spreading. Freedom is restricted and it's affecting everyone. I don't trust the government very much and think it's enough if people take care and behave responsibly.
I'm against it. I don't find it all right that they take us from a health pass to a vaccination pass. Each individual should have a right to do with their body what they think is right for them, and natural immunity works.
I am for it. It's of my opinion that I am protected and I can go where I want and do what I want, so long as I present the pass.
I don't think vaccine passports are a good idea because it infringes on our freedom, and I think that there is insufficient information to make an informed decision. As a young person, I'm left wondering what to do. I did get vaccinated because the alternative would mean I'd have certain freedoms taken away.
Now, from the government's point of view, it says this vaccine passport is needed to stop the rapid increase in COVID cases that the country is experiencing at the moment, mainly due to the new Omicron variant. However, given that intervention from Macron, there is a sense that those who may have been persuaded to vote for this bill in the past might be looking to change their mind, and it's not clear now whether this will pass at all. President Macron is a man who's been described as an arrogant president by many people over the last few years, something he himself addressed really in an interview where he tried to humble himself in front of the French, saying that he had learned the lessons, his mistakes, the way he had spoken to French people and to the French citizens in the past. But it does seem from this latest outburst that that is a lesson he truly has not yet learned.
All right, now to those stunning labor market numbers. A record number of Americans quitting their jobs, some 4.5 million reported back in November alone. Now, at that same time, the number of job openings hovered near the same in this period. So according to the U.S. Department of Labor, many of those calling it quits came out of the restaurant and hotel industry. So is COVID the main reason for so many resignations? RT's Trinity Chavez has the story.
It's being called the Great Resignation. A record number of Americans are telling their bosses, "I quit." Newly released data from the Labor Department says a record-breaking 4.5 million people quit their jobs in November voluntarily, with the majority of those employees being women. Primarily in the industries where you have to be there in person to work, like the restaurant and hotel industry, warehousing, transportation, and healthcare sectors, where we have seen doctors and nurses overworked, especially since the start of the pandemic.